The shocking thing is that, as we talk right now, there are children across Ireland who are being sexually abused. And the perpetrators of this sexual abuse know that the chances of them being held to account are pretty close to nil. You're very welcome to Compass Media. Joining me this evening from our Dundalk studio is Dr. Finbar Markey to discuss the horrendous failure of the Irish state to deal currently with child sex abuse. Thank you for joining me this evening, Finbar.
Thanks for inviting me, Anna. In terms of this particular subject matter, I would have some experience in it from the point of having a PhD looking at organisational culture change in public and social health organisations in the Irish Republic. So it's a topic that's of interest to me because from the contents of what we're going to see in this programme and that what I'm aware of, things are not changing in this country. If anything, it would appear they're getting worse at times. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on that subject, Anna.
So on that note, Finbar, I think that we will look at a video that we've put together that helps to explain somewhat the background to what we're going to be discussing.
Mick Finnegan, Paul Mulholland and Martin Hoy met then Fianna Fáil spokeswoman for children Anne Rabbitte in 2019 and briefed her on the sexual abuse they allegedly suffered as children in St John's Ambulance. Deputy Rabbitte privately raised concerns with the then Minister for Children, Catherine Sapona, who wrote to Bernard Gloucester, who was then CEO of Tusla. Gloucester, in a letter dated December the 5th, 2019 to Deputy Rabbitte, stated, "All available information suggests that there is no evidence of systemic or organisational abuse within St John's Ambulance." St John's Ambulance waited until the eve of the St Patrick's Bank Holiday weekend when Roderick O'Gorman and the Cabinet was out of the country to publish the damning 300-page report on the independent investigation conducted by Dr. Geoffrey Shannon, Senior Counsel, who was commissioned in 2020 by St John's Ambulance when Finnegan, Mulholland and Hoy went public with their stories in the Irish Times. Mick Finnegan is demanding that Tusla answer questions as to how the charity was given a clean bill of health given the scale of abuse detailed by survivors and confirmed in Dr. Shannon's report, published last Thursday. In a statement to RTE's Primetime, Tusla said that at the time of the correspondence, Tusla had no information that there was any child currently at risk within St John's Ambulance Service. Mick Finnegan has called on Bernard Gloucester, who was recently appointed as head of the HSE, to provide a direct explanation as to how he came to conclude that child abuse was not widespread in the organisation. Mr Finnegan told yesterday's Mail on Sunday, "I will be following up with Tusla to find out details of the investigation they carried out that enabled them to give St John's Ambulance a clean bill of health. There are huge question marks over that. I think it's important to see their process into how they look into issues relating to child protection." Mr Finnegan went on to say, "As the Special Rapporteur for Child Protection pointed out, it is a case of the organisation being able to mark their own homework and say, everything's okay here. Or did they carry out something more in depth? We need to address all these issues because if we don't, we will see history repeating itself." Bernard Gloucester did not respond to requests from the Mail on Sunday for comment. And the Children's Minister, Roderick O'Gorman, who was in India as part of the Global St Patrick's Weekend mission, did not respond either to requests for comment from the Mail on Sunday. last Thursday night's RTE Investigates presented by Aoife Hegarty is a shocking revelation into the failure by state bodies to properly investigate reports of child sex abuse.
When I hear now about these stories, about other officers telling cadets you're never to be in the same room as him, as your own, the higher echelon knew all about it and didn't do anything about it.
Today's damning report finds that St John Ambulance failed to investigate or intervene when children were at risk, but it also reveals recent reports of grooming and child sexual abuse.
The government is well aware of the widespread sexual abuse of children ongoing in the country, and they are doing nothing about it. In 2019, the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice submitted a 13,000-page report to every member of the Dáil, which documented in detail the state's failure to respond to child sex abuse endemic in Irish society. Then Leader of the Opposition, Micheál Martin, tabled a parliamentary question to the Minister for Children, Catherine Zappone. In her response, she said she did not contact Tusla about the report and noted some of his recommendations, saying, "Recommendations relating to An Garda Síochána and the family law courts are a matter for the Minister for Justice." There was over 1,800 reports of child sex abuse made to Tusla between January and May 2022, and this was an increase from 1,300 for the same period in 2021, representing a shocking 40% increase. A Garda Inspector's report published in 2018 found that only 4% of child sex abuse cases result in a court conviction. The report also revealed 66% of all reported sex crimes in Ireland involve a child victim. Kitty Holland, who is the social affairs correspondent with the Irish Times, appears to be the only journalist in Ireland attempting to report on what is happening to some mothers when they report that their child is being sexually abused by its father and end up losing custody to the perpetrator. I concluded the foreword to the 2019 report, The Triad Rules, Tusla, the family law courts and the Gardai, by saying, "People in the past are excused somewhat because they claim it was generally not known at that time what was happening. The present generation reading this report cannot claim ignorance. I hope and pray that we don't have to wait decades for a series of exposes in mainstream media to finally get justice for these birth mothers and their children who are suffering at the hands of this triad."
Finbar, having viewed that video, what are your thoughts?
On an individual case level about this particular organisation and the victims, again, I'm never tired of being shocked at the stories that I hear and the news that eventually comes out after years and years in which the victims are not only suffering from their abuse, but they're also suffering from the process of trying to be acknowledged for the abuse that they suffered and trying to stop the abuse happening to other people. It's a litany of failures in this specific example, as it's a litany of failures since the 1960s or 70s in terms of how we've looked into things and how we've tried to investigate. Because we have investigations, then we have investigations into investigations, which is what happened here. And that the head of Tusla at the time allegedly carried out and stated that he carried out an investigation. And the quality of that investigation, as these calls are calling for, the quality of and type of investigation that was allegedly carried out, we need to explore, because that organisation obviously hasn't changed. It's only a short while ago that that alleged investigation happened. So at an individual case level, again, it's shocking. We have victims here who have not been acknowledged, whose victimhood has been doubled down on by the state's attempts to cover things up as usual and put a wall in between the public, the victims, and the occurrences and the failures of the state itself. So my overall take is individually, Again, my heart goes out to the people involved. I'm very annoyed at the organisations that have tried to cover this up and suppress it. At a wider level, it's more of the same. And this came out because of the brave investigation of somebody who eventually did look into this, who's currently a judge at the moment. But again, how many years did people have to go through this? How many people suffered? Did people take their lives? Would acknowledgement of this and support of victims have maybe saved some of those victims? Whether we're talking about mother and baby homes, St. John's Ambulance Service, other cases of abuse that there seems to be a litany of, it doesn't seem to be changing. Something significant has to happen. People need to be publicly punished to ensure that these cover-ups don't happen anymore.
There's a lot to unpack there, Finbar, in what you have just said. And I suppose one of the things that we need to look at and examine more closely is the call by Mick Finnegan at the weekend for an investigation into how Tusla currently deals with reports of child sex abuse. And if we note, he went to Deputy Anne Rabbitte, who then contacted the Minister for Children, Catherine Zappona, who then contacted Bernard Gloucester, who then gave St. John's Ambulance a clean bill of health. Now, as the convener to the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice, I was one of 3 people who met with Bernard Gloucester in 2019. And we informed Bernard Gloucester of the fact that we had mothers who, when they reported child sex abuse, ended up having custody of their children taken from them and the custody of the children being handed over to the perpetrators of the sexual abuse. And at that meeting was Bernard Gloucester, Jim Gibbons, and Ger Brophy. And from the Alliance of Birth Mothers, there was myself, our spokesperson, Barbara Scanlon, and Maura Butterley, who is a retired social worker and our mentor. And we got an undertaking from Bernard Gloucester at that meeting that he would bring in an independent investigator to examine some of the files of the mothers that we represent. And we left the meeting very happy about this outcome, only to discover in the days that followed that he went back on his promise to us and he said that there would be a Tusla investigation of the files involved. So, you know, there has been an ongoing problem with how Tusla has been dealing with child sex abuse. And might I add that Anne Rabbitte was actually instrumental in helping us to establish the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice back in June 2019. So I think we'll have a look now at attempts by Deputy Bernard Durkin since last September to raise this issue in the Dáil.
And to take the children away from its natural mother is the most appalling thing that can be done to any woman. In the family law courts of very subjective Section 47 reports, resulting in the removal of children from the custody of their mother in appalling circumstances, where the Gardai were ordered by the court to enter the classroom. I know.
Deputy, that is a specific case you're referring to, and you're making allegations about subjective reports. There is a division in relation to this House and the courts. So
removal of the children in that callous fashion, and placing them in the custody of their other parent who was previously.
Deputy, you're out of order.
The mothers have been separated from their children, have been subjected to appalling indifference and callousness by the system. I think it's important to bring them to the attention of the House and to the Minister, whatever the issues are, even though the House may say, well, this is a matter for the courts, you have to bring it right to the courts. That's not our function. That's not our function in this House. Our function in this House is to raise in the House something that appears to be going wrong. There were situations in this country in the past where issues were raised in the House against the rule, as it were, with huge opposition, that ultimately ended up in major inquiries, serious inquiries, involving a whole lot of people. It would have been far better to have dealt with them originally. And I finish again by simply drawing to Section 47. Minister, it needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with soon, because there will be a tragedy. The level of emotion, trauma, and the coldness of what surrounds a mother when she is told that she doesn't matter in this business, or that if she does matter only in a way decided by somebody else. And if the matters, the activities of Mr. Sheehan, Jim Sheehan in the courts are allowed to continue, there will be serious consequences. The position now remains, I think, for Tusla to exert itself in such a way as to ensure that without doubt we are absolutely assured of its intention to preserve in all circumstances and assert the rights of the child in these particular circumstances, where mothers are even prevented from meeting with the children and are subject to the most appalling hardship and disregard in terms of the children's rights, the children's entitlements and their own rights. I wish to raise again the issue of the continued persecution and prosecution of Irish mothers and their children in the family law courts, resulting in many cases in arrest and imprisonment.
Thank you, Deputy. You've raised this matter and I've repeatedly pointed out to you, I'm going to let the Taoiseach come in, I've repeatedly pointed out to you the separation of powers, and you're raising serious allegations that cross the border.
Over the past 6 months, I've repeatedly raised the question on the plight of a large number of women who, throughout the length and breadth of this country, who find themselves subjected to extraordinary abusive situations, whereby, in many cases, they are not allowed to meet or see their children except by telephone, where nothing appears to be happening as a matter of urgency, where something must happen as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, this House is actually turning its back on the women who are mothers who are being subject to this treatment. So, I have had brought to my attention in recent times the concern of a fairly considerable cohort of women who are mothers, who find themselves in a situation that their children are removed from them, not because they were a bad mother or that they had a bad home, but for other reasons, and are the victims in terms of referral to the system, through the system, through numerous hearings, whereby they acknowledge that they will not have attention brought to their concerns that they have brought to the attention of the appropriate authorities. But I'm asking you, Minister, at this particular stage, to please recognise this problem exists. Thursday, I bring to the attention of the House the scandalous situation of the treatment of women who are mothers who are going through the family law courts, wherein their rights are being abolished virtually, where under the in-camera rule they're being subject to the kind of abuse that was used in prisoner of war camps in years gone by, and which is totally alien to the Irish Constitution, the Irish justice system, and in fact human rights. I have referred this information to the ministers, relevant ministers, Justice and Children, but it would appear to me now that at least a preliminary inquiry should be carried out to ascertain the full extent of what is happening before it reaches the serious consequences of a major national scandal.
That's just a couple of minutes compilation of what Deputy Bernard Durkin has highlighted in the Dáil since last September on several occasions. And the link to the full video is in the comment box below. So, Finbar, you know, it's very damning actually that all of the TDs practically in the Dáil at present are aware of what is actually going on. This massive failure to investigate child sex abuse and to have the perpetrators put behind bars.
For years, Anna, I worked in social care as an applied social care practitioner, and I worked with kids in residential care in the residential homes themselves. And I'm well versed on the pathology of Tusla and other state organizations. And what I mean by pathology is, you know, we'd usually describe pathology to describe individuals or personalities, types, people who would lie, deceive, try to obtain their own way no matter what, and will do anything to achieve that. Some people might call it sociopathic behavior, but I think pathology is a general term that would be used. And it can be applied to organizations when the people in organizations are themselves pathological, especially the upper management, and when the culture of the organization becomes pathological. So that's protecting itself, hiding information, suppressing information, making victims look like abusers themselves, things like that. So I've come across that for many, many years, and where possible, I've tried to fight that myself. In terms of this phenomenon that's coming out, and there's more and more cases of social workers and social work teams and the social work managers that sign off on the actions of those who work under them, actually actively sending children into the arms of abusers without proper full investigations, and quite often turning on the individuals that reported, in this case, mothers. And in the last 2 weeks, I've come across a case of a woman. I won't say what county she's in. I won't want to identify her because of her family sensitivities, but she had all of her children taken off her and taken into care, and she had reported abuse. And after many years of fighting, she took her own life 2 weeks ago. And I'm told, and I'm being made more and more aware, that this kind of thing is replicated all over the country. And I can't necessarily understand general pathology in an organization. I always was brought up to believe and educated to believe that being a part of an organization means sticking to its ethics, trying to make it do what it says in the tin. But when it comes to sending children back to an abusive parent, when there's another parent who clearly is not abusive and is concerned, that's a phenomenon that I cannot understand, I cannot fathom. And to my mind, if it's happening, it's criminal.
Deputy Kathleen Funchnan is the chair of the Oireachtas Committee for Children. And back in 2019, when Bernard Gloucester appeared before the Children's Committee, she actually said that it was a toxic organisation. And she went on then to explain how mothers were having huge difficulties having access to their children in care, that there appeared to be no reunification plans in place, and that when she tried to advocate on behalf of constituents who had come to her, she was met with a stone wall. And, you know, the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice has, since 2019, made several requests to appear before the Children's Committee. In fact, representatives of the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice met with Deputy Funchnan back in 2019, and we got a very warm reception from her. She was very, very responsive to what we had to say. And in fact, a number of the issues that we raised with her, she went on to raise with Bernard Gloucester when he appeared before the Children's Committee in 2019. Then the general election came in 2020 and she was appointed chair of the committee. And all our efforts to date to appear before the Children's Committee have been stonewalled. And, you know, that is really, I suppose, denying advocates for mothers whose children have been taken into state care to have a voice before that committee. Now, the Taoiseach today, when questioned in the Dáil about Dr. Jeffrey Shannon's report, in response to a question, said that representatives from Tusla will be called shortly to appear before the Children's Committee. But it just all seems to go down rabbit holes. Nothing seems to come of any of this. Like, we've seen how Deputy Bernard Durkin has been trying to raise this issue since last September to no avail, and we saw there in the video where Deputy Catherine Connolly, in her capacity as Last Count Corla, has tried to stall him from raising the issue. It's really very worrisome, Finbar.
I've been following Bernard Durkin on M-Compass Media because they have been covering him for the last few months, and whenever he has a speech, they do put it up, and it's quite useful that way. His language is very strong. In one of his speeches, he described the family law courts as prisoner of war camps. And that's very strong language. And he may have a point from the perspective of mothers and quite often fathers who are up against the odds when they're trying to achieve and do the right thing for their children. Just to go back a little bit on a couple of things that you said there, Anna, in terms of repatriation of families, within the law, that's supposed to be a key objective of Tusla, to reunite families, to put in supports for families, things like that. And it's also supposed to be the policy of Tusla. I worked in specifically with children in residential care for 10 years. Never, and I worked with many children, never did I come across one of those examples where there was attempts for children to be repatriated with their family. And every case of a child in a residential home at that time was costing between 5,000 and 10,000 euros per week. 5,000 to 10,000 euros per week. And I found that not always, but sometimes, the cause of children being in care, ultimately, when you analysed it and when you reflected deeply on it, was poverty. And instead of using a quarter of those funds to try to repatriate a family, to make them comfortable, to have the supports that they need, they are being maintained in private, quite often private residential care units, in which the private residential care owners and managers are afraid to speak up and be professional and ethical against the social work teams that are ultimately giving them the contracts. Each child is a contract. And there's a fear to speak up. The system is being privatized. And I believe because of that, there's even more opportunity for abuse and the stifling of any discussion on that abuse. I personally praise the likes of Bernard Durkin, TD, for the work that he's doing, because he's putting his head above the parapet. Because I suspect that the deeper you dig into this issue, the dirtier it's going to get. We're not sure how dirty yet, but we're talking about an issue where children are being returned to paedophiles. We're talking about an issue where mothers are being driven insane. They're literally taking their own lives after the struggle to save their children and to stand up against the mammoth organisation that Tusla and the Irish government is. So I praise Bernard Durkin. The problem seems to be systemic in nature. In terms of how we solve it, people need to be punished within the organisations. Everybody who joins Tusla needs to know, if we don't do the right thing, we will be punished. Managers need to be punished. Whole systems need to be changed. That's going to take a little while, but I don't hear this coming from any of the political parties. I don't hear of any plans being developed to put ethics and the proper code of human conduct and respect back into services, and to have a pride within our services, have a pride in cleaning them up. And if you have a pride in cleaning things up, that means the dirt has to come out. It has to come out. And so I praise Bernard Durkin, but there's no attempts at the moment to repatriate families whatsoever. The system's been further privatized, which creates a concern for me that it opens up even more opportunity for abuse of children and abuse of families into the future.
Just to point out to you, Finbar, that there's currently in and around 870 children taken into state care who are accommodated in private residential homes. And those private residential homes are not subject to HICWA inquiries or investigations. Another point that I would like to make is that when mothers of children in state care were told by their children during access that they were being sexually abused, and the mothers reported this, then all access was completely cut off. And I know of a number of cases where this happened, and in one particular case, the mother hadn't seen her child for a number of years, and then when the child was very badly and brutally raped by the foster father, that led to a Gardai investigation. The children then were immediately returned to the mother. It's just absolutely horrendous what is actually happening in this country. And, you know, it really annoys me so much to see TDs, and I don't want to name them, but there are a few TDs who have actually been covered in glory for the manner in which they have spoken out against what happened to Maurice McCabe, who have spoken out in the Dáil Chamber about the historic abuse of mothers and children in the Magdalen laundries and in the mother and baby homes. And yet these deputies, I suppose, fail to speak out about what is currently happening. And they know what's happening. You know, as we've seen already, a 13,000-page report documenting the failure to deal with child sex abuse was submitted to every Dáil deputy in the last Dáil. And so they know that it's happening, but they're doing nothing about it. And, you know, we heard Catherine Connolly there speaking about the separation of the various organs of the state. The judiciary is independent of the legislature and the executive. But that is just a system that allows the abuse to go on, because the in-camera rule that's in the family law courts means that what goes on in the family law court cannot be discussed outside of that court. Now, the horrendous abuse of those men at the hands of individuals in St. John's Ambulance, it was possible to make that public because they were not bound by the in-camera rule. But the mothers that we represent in the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice are not able to speak out about what is happening because of this in-camera rule. So everything remains hidden. And we had a meeting with Senator Mary Siri Carney, who is a barrister, last year. And we, you know, when we pointed out to her that if there is a disclosure of child sex abuse in the family law court, the in-camera rule results in, or disclosure of child sex abuse not being reported to the Gardai. You know, it would need a dispensation from the judge to allow for that disclosure to be made to the Gardai. And she was very, very dismissive of what we had to say when we said that. But that actually is undocumented in a report by Women's Aid. So as I have said in the report that I did, that we can forgive past generations for what happened somewhat because they didn't know what was happening. But this present generation will never be forgiven by future generations for what is currently happening now in this massive cover-up of child sex abuse, because it's known, but there's nothing being done about it.
I would agree with you, Anna. And all of these politicians view themselves as so brave at the time that the child church sex abuses cases and the scandals were coming out, and they were willing to talk out about it. They were willing to talk about all of these historical things, but they're not willing to not only talk about it, but to take it by the bull by the horns in terms of what's happening at the moment. And to me, it just shows cowardice. It shows self-interest, and it shows a lack of a spine, to be honest with you. And again, we revert back to those few individuals like Bernard Durkin who are consistently speaking out on this issue, even though it's not doing them any favours in many ways, I'm sure, politically. But I'm sure Bernard Durkin is going to continue, and I'm going to keep on watching what he's doing and what the Alliance of Birth Mothers are doing as well. And I do hope that you guys can eventually get a hearing from the Oireachtas. I suspect that you're not getting a hearing because you're not funded. You're not funded by the state. You're not funded by an organisation that's funded by the state. And so you can't be controlled. And everything that you say in that Oireachtas meeting would be put on the record and will be there for history. And I think that's maybe what they're afraid of with you guys.
I have to also acknowledge the fact that the Aontaithe leader, Deputy Peadar Tobin, and the leader of the rural independent group, Mattie McGrath, have done absolutely Trojan work as well to highlight what is actually happening. And just to mention that Deputy McGrath hosted a number of mothers from the Alliance at a meeting in Leinster House just before Christmas. And we were in the visitors gallery when he tabled a question. The Minister for Children was not present in the Dáil chamber, but afterwards Deputy McGrath brought myself and the mothers down to the restaurant, and Minister Roderick O'Gorman came in, and I went up to him and I asked him to come and meet some of the mothers, which he did, and he was very courteous. Some of the mothers that were there would have been victims of the issues that we're discussing here tonight. And I asked Minister Gorman, would he meet with the Alliance of Birth Mothers formally? And what really surprised me was he said to me, I don't know if I'll be allowed to meet with you, but send in a request. So Deputy Mattie McGrath sent in a request on our behalf for a meeting with the Minister, and we've heard nothing to date. So I just find, as the convener to the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, that we just keep coming up against brick walls. We had a meeting with representatives from the Children's Ombudsman's Office last September. Again, we raised these issues with them. And in an email that we sent to them in January requesting an update, we got an email back saying that they had noted the issues that we had raised and gave a list of reasons as to why they wouldn't be investigating them at this time. We were also in communication with the last rapporteur for children in his capacity as Chief Legal Advisor on child issues to the government. His name is Conor O'Mahony, Professor Conor O'Mahony from UCC. And while he did engage with us at length via email, he informed us that his brief did not allow him to investigate, what we had said to him. And he advised that we refer the matter to the Children's Ombudsman. So, we're just brought around and around in circles and going no place. And the shocking thing is that, as we talk right now, there are children across Ireland who are being sexually abused. And the perpetrators of this sexual abuse know that the chances of them being held to account are pretty close to nil. We saw that the very few reports of child sex abuse actually result in a prosecution. And of those prosecutions, only 4% result in a conviction. So it's really horrendous what is happening. You know, the suffering of these children is just unbelievable, and the torment that they're going through, and the torment of their mothers, and the torment of their siblings. I leave the final word to you, Finbar.
Anna, we have seen this time and again. Government systems, managements, knowing that there's abuse going on, whether we're talking about the noughties and the 2023, or we're going back to the 1940s, 50s, 60s, it just doesn't seem to have changed. There is opportunity for change. There's opportunity for brave leadership to stand up to this, to acknowledge it and to do something about it. As you say, right now, there's children cuddled up in their beds in fear of who's going to come in tonight to touch them. And in the meantime, government are turning their back and running away from them. That's what's happening ultimately. Please God, something will break soon. Keep up your good work, good work of the Alliance of Birthmothers, and anybody else who's trying to challenge these issues. What I would ask is that you don't give up. There is support out there for you. This issue will break someday. Please God, it won't be later, and it'll actually be sooner, but it will break someday. And when it does, I hope that the people who are culpable, both the abusers and the people who hid the abuse, I hope they're healthy and well enough to go to prison.
I want to thank you, Finbar, for the support that you're giving the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice. And I just want to reiterate that the mothers that we represent could not appear on camera for this programme because they are bound by the in-camera rule. I want to thank you sincerely for watching this video. Compass Media does not ask for any donations. Myself and Finbar and the other people involved do all of this work in a voluntary capacity. And instead, we appeal to you to share out this video, because it is going to take a massive outcry from the people of Ireland to save these children from ongoing sexual abuse. We have a responsibility to do something about it. Until we meet again on Compass Media, Bannock de Arif Galer.